Hello, I'm Michael Mayer from vocalwisdom.com, and this is a companion video to the article, The #1 Mistake Singers Are Making. As I state in the article, this #1 mistake we're making as singers is exhaling when we sing. And so I wanted to give a little demonstration of how to do some of the things that I talk about, especially in the last section. So as I said, we need to start with good structure, and basically a real shortcut to figuring this out is have a feeling of stretching, gently stretching. We never need to do anything a lot. It's just a gentle stretching in all directions. So we feel up and down, side to side, even a little bit front and back direction, just so that we have this feeling of vitality, alertness, being alive, and also flexibility and flexibility and some volume, especially to the torso, because the torso is really what's responsible for our breathing. So if we want to avoid uncontrolled exhaling when we sing, we need to have good coordination in the torso, especially. So stretch in all directions, and basically this feeling, this physical condition should really correlate to positive emotional expressions. I have an article about using emotions for singing, and this is an example of that in action. The body should be expressing inspiration, joy, desire to express through our singing. And that gives us that feeling of being uplifted, and that's very much the feeling of gently stretching in all directions. A common tool many people might recognize is practicing the idea of a joyful surprise, and it kind of gives you that feeling of lightness, buoyancy, and it stimulates an emotional feeling. You can practice, you can practice any kind of emotional response that you can create it in your imagination and just practice feeling it in your body. Another one that I like to use even more than the joyful surprise is smelling a wonderful aroma. Pretend that you can imagine that whatever has meaning for you, a situation where a great meal is being cooked in the kitchen. It could be Christmas, it could be some other holiday, it could just be Sunday afternoon family dinners, but something where the food is your favorite and it smells fantastic, and it gives you that feeling that you just want to, oh, that smells so good, and you just kind of want to draw it right in, just draw it as deep into you as you can. This is the same idea as the old traditional smelling a rose, and the idea with that is, any kind of smelling is to stimulate a positive emotion, so it gets inspired, gives us a feeling of being uplifted, and then also the smelling draws this in. It opens up the nasal passages. It draws the breath in nice and deep. And there's also the positive condition of the larynx being drawn down with that. So these types of things can be very helpful in setting us up and learning how to prepare to sing, because we really want to sing in this changed emotional state, this changed physical / emotional state. We don't really want to sing in our normal daily state of being, because that's just not an effective state for what we're after. But unfortunately, that's what we tend to do pretty consistently, pretty normally, I think, is we just kind of, we're our normal state, and then we try to sing, and then because it's not very effective, it's not in a very effective state, the result is not that good, and then so then we have to then we start doing all kinds of so-called technical adjustments, trying to improve what's happening. But what I've found is that over the course of probably 10 years of doing this, that if we can change the state, then the singing, the act of singing becomes a completely different experience, a completely different behavior, and so as a result, the result is completely different. So I really encourage people to explore this and see if they can discover the benefits of this. Now, the feeling of stretch that I'm talking about goes right hand in hand with the feeling of inhalation. And then if we combine that with the emotional feeling of inspiration, then breathing becomes almost automatic. And then the idea of suspending the breath is just a feeling of keeping that going. And then we sing in that suspended, inhaled position, very vital, very alive, very energetic and enthusiastic, and it's also very flexible. So sometimes people, when they're learning this, they might tend to get a little rigid and holding, so that's not really what we want to do. And sometimes that happens because there's too much breathing happening. So it's also important to not breathe too much, especially on the inhalation. So, just like we don't want to be exhaling when we sing, we don't want to inhale too much before we sing, because if you think about the nature of air pressure, we've learned in physics class that air pressure goes from high to low. And so if we breathe a lot, if we breathe beyond a certain point, we actually create a situation where the air pressure inside the body is more than outside, so it becomes almost unstoppable. That air pressure has to come out. And so then we're stuck with one of two things happening. Clamping to keep it from coming out, and then the throat's basically closed, or it comes out and then it messes up the vibration. So that's something to check, is that if you don't feel like you're exhaling but you're still having that problem, check and see if you're breathing too much on the inhale. So we keep that feeling of suspension going, and compression of the air happens almost instinctively, unconsciously. It happens in response to our desire to say something. And the compression is important, but if we start doing it too consciously, we tend to do too much. The air compression just kind of happens, just that much, and it's just enough to keep a nice steady pressure against the vibration, so it keeps feeding the vibration constantly. But this only happens if we're in a position that allows it to happen, a position and a condition. That's why it's so important to have the feeling of stretch. The abdomen is slightly in, because that's what's keeping the air pressure leaning up towards the vibration at the larynx. So this condition needs to be in an effective state. So now this emotional feeling that I'm talking about also not only informs the torso, but it goes through the throat, the mouth, and the face. And the way it, like when I talked about the emotional exercises, joyful surprise, smelling wonderful aromas, notice that the face gets a reaction too. And so, for instance, the face in this has a slight lift, and the lift comes from the eyes, because these muscles run down the face here, lift under the eyes, and we feel empty. We feel empty behind the face because the nasal passages are open. So we want to put these together so that we can really feel these conditions happening. Now, when our face is in this condition, it should be a pleasant expression. It shouldn't be squinting. It shouldn't, look awkward. It shouldn't be a grimace. It needs to be a pleasant expression. So it should feel like we're just kind of slightly smiling. In fact, I like to say that we're smiling with the face and the eyes more than we're smiling with the lips. Because it is true that if we smile too much with the mouth, we can risk spreading, especially if we fall into a mouth resonance sort of condition in the resonance system. So it's important that it be kind of a slight smile. A lot of the old writings talk about a Mona Lisa smile. So the smile in the Mona Lisa painting is just kind of just very subtle. And so you have this feeling, though, especially right here alongside the nose and over the cheekbones, of that's where you smile. And it's so then the mouth opens. It feels like the mouth opens in an upward direction, like you're going to laugh. Ah, ha, ha, ha. And so it's not really smiling, it's laughing. And this lifts. And so it feels like the mouth opens upward and not down. So the common direction to drop the jaw, we need to get rid of that, because dropping the jaw pulls everything down. It pulls the face down, it pulls the tongue down. We get a kind of a heavy, dull, So we want to feel like we're opening up. And it makes everything feel weightless. Dropping the jaw makes it feel heavy. Lifting, it feels like we're lifting the skull off of the jaw and off of the larynx. So now jaw tension disappears, larynx stiffness disappears, the larynx becomes free to vibrate without encumbrance, without weight. And that's critical. So open nasal passages are important so that the nasal pharynx participates as part of the resonance system. It's pretty well recognized that resonance takes place in the pharynx, but the pharynx has 3 levels, and we want to allow all 3 levels to participate. The majority of singers that I observe are really only using the lower 2/3 of the pharynx. And they kind of treat the roof of the mouth and the soft palate as being the top of the resonance, when in reality the nasopharynx, which is above the soft palate at the level of the nose, is actually a major part of the resonance system. And without it, the voice is going to be significantly heavier than we want it to be. So it's important to have that lift so that the nasopharynx is accessible, feels open, and then instead of it has a huge influence on the clarity of vowels, especially the ah vowel. The ah vowel tends to sound like in a lot of singers because they're resonating only in the lower portion of the pharynx and not including the upper portion of the pharynx. So, along with this feeling of opening up is the release of the whole throat. And so this is what it means to have an open throat, not making some kind of enlargement back here in like a yawn. That's fake. A real open throat just means that it's released, it's hollow. It feels like when we're breathing in a very smooth, a very smooth breathing sort of way, silent breathing. It If you hear noise when you breathe, that's a sign of constriction, because that's what's making that noise, is constriction. So we want to make sure the throat is open, not constricted, and that means it feels like nice, smooth, silent breathing. Now, having talked about this nasopharynx resonating space, it's also possible to overdo that and try to sing up here without keeping some connection to the vibration and some connection to the lower resonance. So, we hear this in some lighter tenors who are thinking of singing in their head. And so you get this kind of a thing like this. Ah, and now it's disconnected from the true vibration. So we just have to be aware of what it's like when we go, out of balance, we go off track. So we don't want to cut off the lower resonance, but we don't want to obsess over the lower resonance. Oh, and same thing, we don't want to neglect the upper resonator, but again, we don't want to obsess with it either and only sing up there. So it's important that the whole instrument be behaving naturally and be participating in an equal degree, so that every part is doing what it is responsible for. And there's a little bit of a feeling of stretch in this too. So, but again, it's a subtle stretch. It's not, we don't want real big stretches. Again, that gets us into the yawning sometimes. So we have to watch out. It's a gradual process of learning how much is just the right amount. Now, this goes all the way through the condition of our resonating system. So first we talked about the condition of the respiratory system with the torso. And then we talked about the condition of the resonating system up here with the airway, the pharynx and everything. And these conditions have a positive influence on the larynx itself. So when so then the larynx is now the third of the three main components that make up the musical instrument of the voice. So when the two components of respiration and resonation are balanced within themselves, they have a positive influence on the phonation component of the larynx. So that's kind of the whole idea, is get all the parts working correctly within their own system and then balance them together with each other, so each system is balancing each other, because they have a great deal of interdependence and influence on each other. So when we get these things set up right, then now that puts us into a condition where the larynx can behave freely and completely and naturally. So then we get into this feeling of suspension and emotional inspiration. And from the suspended state, we start. That's how we start the tone. The tone is started by starting the vibration. But not how we've been taught, by releasing breath in terms of breath flow. That's releasing loose breath. Ah, that's like trying to use the breath as if the breath were the tone itself. Ah, that's just not physiological fact. That's a misinterpretation. Instead of releasing loose breath, we release the vibration. It's kind of like, and by coming from the suspended stillness, the glottis is able to lay together. There's no muscular closing happening. Because we're not breathing, as I describe in the article, the glottis is able to lay together, and we're able to start the vibration from this closed position, which is really the normal position. It only opens when we're breathing. So it's really the at-rest position is closed, which means we don't have to close it. If the at-rest position were open, then we would need to do something actively to close it. We don't. Its at-rest position is closed. So we stop breathing, ah. Open resonators, and inside the open resonators, ready to receive the sound energy from the vibration. And instead of releasing breath, ah, or instead of ah, hitting the voice with some kind of muscular rigidity, we think of saying the vowel and the pitch as a unit from the bottom of the throat. And the bottom of the throat, this is old Italian terminology, sing from the bottom of the throat, but the bottom of the throat is the larynx. So it's the same thing as saying pronounce from the larynx. And when we do this, it feels like it just starts itself. It's spontaneous. So that's the thing that we want to. That's the thing we want to have as our normal condition. So it feels like the voice starts itself, and we're in the suspended feeling. We don't have to aspirate, use an aspirate to get it going, and we don't need to hit it with a strike. This is what Garcia called the stroke of the chest. That's been, this is now what's referred to as the coup de glotte, which is not what was originally meant. A coughing sort of start, and a hitting of the voice. Garcia called that a stroke of the chest. It's not what was meant originally by the stroke of the glottis description. Stroke of the glottis is stroking. It's like if you have a baby. You're not slapping it, you are stroking it and caressing it. Ah, 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 ah. It's just a nice, spontaneous, clean, spontaneous articulation of the vowel. So there's no, and it feels like there's no movement. And that's the nice thing. There's nice, calm stillness. So like I said, we release the vibration, not the breath. We don't hit the voice. We don't tighten the voice. We don't squeeze the voice. In fact, we do all the opposite of that. We have a gentle stretch. We have buoyancy. We have openness. And then somewhere down there at the bottom of that emptiness, that empty tube, that's where the vibration is. Ah, ah, ah. So that's how we can achieve that absolutely pure vibration. And when we do that, it's so much easier, but it's also so much more complete. So we get the result of much more acoustic energy in the tone. So we don't have to try to sing so loud, because the acoustic energy is already providing the sound that we're trying to achieve. There's more tone, there's more color, and putting all that together, there's more audibility and clarity to the listener in the audience, in the hall. And the best part, the most important part, is we get a healthier instrument. So I hope that this gives some illustration and better understanding of what I discussed and explained in the written article. So I appreciate you watching, and I hope that this helps propel you more farther down the road of development and exploration in this direction. If you have any questions, you can always leave a comment on one of the blog posts, or just drop me an email through my contact page, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Okay, I appreciate you reading and listening, and thanks for joining up with the vocalwisdom.com community. All right, I'll talk to you soon.